Hey you, I'm Sarah Turner. I'm a freelance medical copywriter, and today I want to talk to you about where to get started when you are just starting out copywriting for beginners. So, when I started this whole process, I did it really all on my own through a ton of research online. There was not as many resources as there are today, which I think is a good thing. There's so many resources online today, and you can really do this and make great money as a copywriter. So I want to talk to you about where you can start, where you can find some of your first clients, how you decide between copywriting and content writing, what skills you need, and where are some of the best places to start really getting this off the ground, because that is a question I get asked a lot. So one of the first things I recommend people do when they're starting out is to really get clear on your goals, because that's super important. It can be really hard to know that when you have gotten to the destination if you don't actually define it first. So what are your priorities? For some people, it's time. They want to free up their time. They want to be with their family more. They don't want to work full time. And so think about how many hours you would like to work in a day and write that down. Also, get really clear on the kind of money you want to make and reverse engineer it. So how much money do you want to make per month? How much does that break down to be per week? And then how much does that break down to be per day? Which is going to also help you figure out what kind of projects you want to go after. It's also going to really help you out to say no to projects that don't really fit in to your big goals. And that is super important, because if you don't do that, you can often end up taking on lots of little projects that really aren't going to get you where you want to be, and you don't need to do that. I spent a lot of time in content mills, really getting taken advantage of, not making enough money for it to justify being a writer, and that's a big reason why I love doing this and talking about this, because I want to help you skip that. So first things first, really get clear on your goals. And I cannot stress that enough. So many people don't do it. It changed my life when I started writing out my goals for the year, for 6 months, and for 3 months. 3 months is a really good time period to set some serious goals, because you can accomplish so much in 3 months. It's one of my favorite time frames to think about when I'm setting goals. So be sure you take that seriously. Not enough people do that. I think it is totally reasonable to have a goal up around $5,000 a month. In my 6 months to six figures, I show you how I made about $8,000 a month copywriting. So just really take the time to think about what you want your days to look like. And again, I have students who are working 2 to 3 hours a day. That was their goal, and they're making between $2,000 to $4,000 a month, because they're didn't want to have a full-time job, and they're still doing really well, and they are able to say no to things that don't fit into those goals. Again, I cannot stress that enough. So also, another thing to think about when you're first starting out is, do you want to be a content writer or a copywriter? And I think a lot of people go for content writing because it feels a little less intimidating. But I really personally think that it is so much better to be a copywriter, because you actually have much more of an impact on your client's business. And also, I think even copywriting needs to be incorporated into blogs and inbound marketing strategy, which isn't necessary. Some people don't necessarily call that copywriting, but it is if you write it like a copywriter. So choosing copywriting over content writing is going to allow you to charge more. But yeah, you're going to have to study more. You're going to have to practice more. You're going to have to learn copywriting techniques. But don't be intimidated by that. It's really not as scary as it sounds. It's a lot more fun. You get to think about psychology and neuroscience, and it makes you a more effective communicator. It's actually really interesting. I notice when I watch people give speeches, really high up politicians and things like that, I notice that they use copywriting techniques in their speeches. So copywriting is really more effective communication, and it's why I really recommend being a copywriter over being a content writer. You also get paid more, fact. That's just a fact. Although there are good content writers making decent money, but it's just a little bit harder if you're not actually taking the time to learn about copywriting and the techniques and, emotional triggers and things like that. So not only do I think it's more fun, you get paid more, you're more effective, you help your clients more. It's seems to me better all around. But obviously, I'm a little biased as a copywriter. So the first thing to do when starting out is I really recommend hand copying copy. That is something that is often recommended by copywriters. I mean, I had the honor of meeting some of the most world famous copywriters at an event recently, and they all told me that they started out hand copying copy. So it is not a bad piece of advice. So definitely take that seriously, and you can find a ton of really successful copy on swiped.co, and I recommend doing it for 30 days. Some people, again, I had this really famous copywriter tell me that any copywriter he hired, he made them do it for 90 days. So 30 days seems reasonable. Taking some really excellent pieces of copy, hand copying them, not typing them out, because when you hand copy, you retain it better. It forces you to slow down, forces you to pay more attention to what they're writing, their cadence, their tone, the emotions that they're trying to evoke, their punctuation, whether or not they repeat. And you're going to take in a lot more when you hand copy. So take the time to do that. You're going to be surprised at how much you'll learn. I can't tell you the number of students who have been like, I didn't want to do the hand copy challenge. I didn't see the point. I didn't like reading old ads. And by the end of it, they're like, I learned so much from that practice. And I mean, that was my experience too. I started picking up, oh, okay, I need to use shorter sentences are more effective. So I started practicing writing shorter, punchier sentences. So that is a really great place to start. You're going to learn a ton. Make sure you're asking yourself questions throughout, though, while you're hand copying. Don't just do that and let it go. As you're writing, and even a little bit, take some time after, take the time to really think, what are they doing here? Why are they doing it? And how can I incorporate that when I start copywriting? So that is the first thing that I definitely recommend. I recommend picking a niche, which I think is super important, because to be an excellent copywriter, you need to know your audience really, really well. And you're going to save yourself a ton of time if you really get to know your niche, because anytime you sit down to write for them, if you start I've been writing now for about 6 years, and I know my audience so well. I don't have to do as much research as I did in the beginning. For most things, for new products and new services that I'm first writing about, I have to do a ton of research. But if you are always in the same niche, you are going to be able to speed that process up and really get the ball rolling a lot faster. So that is something that I really recommend, and that is why. The other thing that I recommend is that when you start writing, this is another thing that I see newbies, a mistake newbies make, is they just can't get started writing. They're scared, they have imposter syndrome, but it is like any other craft, like playing a violin or the piano or, creating art. You have to practice to get better. There is no way that you're going to get better copywriting just reading copywriting books. So you got to start writing, and there are 2 different ways that I recommend that. One, if you are just petrified of writing for a client, go ahead and start writing a few pieces and publishing them on a website like Medium. Start publishing them, start sharing them, share them with your friends and family, share them on your social media if you want to. I actually didn't do that because I don't really love to, make my entire social media presence just about copywriting, which is a little difficult. But it's not my favorite. So when I was first starting out, also I was scared. I didn't share a ton. But start writing on things like Medium if you're just so scared to get started. And here's the thing. Try not to just write personal pieces that, are journal entries or similar things like that. Instead, try to recreate something that would be a piece of copy. Find a sales page, or find an email sequence, or find an article that's done really well within your niche. Maybe find your favorite thought leader and find a piece that they've written and try to rewrite it. And it's going to help you to try and rewrite it, for me, to not fully read that piece. Maybe just read the subtitles, skim it, get the idea, see what the CTA is for sure. What are they trying to sell? What are they trying to get the person who's reading to do? read that so you know what the purpose of the piece is, and then try and rewrite it yourself and publish that to Medium. So you can also check out things on BuzzSumo, which is a great website to show which pieces have gone like viral in your niche. You can just type in like a very vague keyword and get a bunch of great ideas that way. And honestly, you'll be surprised at some of the things that have gone viral. You're like, that's not very good. I can definitely rewrite this. And that can be kind of an ego boost as well. So, start writing. And if you're really just scared, just get something out there online. Put it on Medium, call it a victory because it is, and keep moving forward. Then when you're looking for your first contacts, your first clients, I really recommend using your contacts first. And the reason for that is that, well, first of all, every single person, I guarantee it, knows someone who needs copywriting. Whether that is a relative who owns a business, maybe it's a painting business or a house cleaning business or plumbing, or, maybe it's your hairdresser or your yoga studio that you go to. Maybe it's the photographer for your wedding. We all know somebody who could use some copy. So reach out to those people and say, I would love to write your website. I'm going to incorporate SEO. Definitely, if you're going to do website copy and blogs and articles, read a little bit about SEO, but don't stress too much about it because that's a really big rabbit hole you can go down. So that would be my big recommendation about SEO is know kind of what it is, but don't go like too far down that rabbit hole because it's everyone's best guess. And that was something that took me a really long time to figure out. It's everyone's best guess when you're reading about SEO online. Nobody knows exactly how Google ranks things, and it's constantly changing. So incorporate a few good keywords into any website copy that you do, any blogs that you do. Location-specific words are really effective because they're more narrow and less people are searching for them. So for example, if you're writing for your hair salon and you talk to your hairdresser and you're like, hey, I'm starting copywriting. I noticed your website really doesn't have a lot of information on it, and I think that I could really help you. And so, for example, then if I were doing that, I'm in Santa Monica, California, I would say hair color specialist in Santa Monica, California, and incorporate that through their website copy a few times. But I would get really specific about the keywords I'm using. So my favorite thing is for you to reach out to contacts, to people in your life to get your first few clients, because generally they're going to be really grateful that you're going to help them and that, you're reaching out and offering a service to them that they might not even have been aware of that they need. I have a really great story of one of my students who did that for her photographer for her wedding. And a few months later, she was like number 1 in Google for wedding photographer in her area. So that is really great because one, it boosts your confidence because you get to see, SEO in action if you choose to do website copy. It also means that you get your first client, which is a great ego boost. It also allows you a chance to kind of have those first initial conversations with somebody where you're discussing your work and what you do and what it's going to do for them. And that is super important because that's a conversation that you're going to get better at the more you practice. So, that's a good example. And using your contacts is also great because generally they already know you, so they're going to trust you a little bit more than just reaching out to somebody you've, never talked to ever. So contacts are the number 1 place that I recommend people start. And this is because you're still working on building your portfolio and things like that. Another thing I want to add, 2 things actually, is 1, it's okay for these first few people to not be within your niche. And that's because you just really want to get writing, get started writing. I cannot stress that enough. So it's totally okay if the first few pieces are not in your niche. It's still going to be good practice on client interactions and on, getting started writing. The other thing is don't do it for free. And the reason you shouldn't ever do it for free, even if it is a friend or a family member, is because when you do something for free, it lowers the value of your work in their mind. Whether it's conscious or subconscious, it absolutely does. I love this story recently. I was talking with someone who works for Apple, and she was telling me that, Apple never offers deals on their products or services because it hurts their brand image. Instead, on things like Black Friday, they will offer deals and services, but they make Amazon front the deal and show it as if they're the one making the products, cheaper for Black Friday. But Apple never runs deals. And it's because they know the power of cheapening your product. It really communicates that whatever it is you're doing is not worth that much if you don't charge that much. But I understand that starting out, it can be really hard to charge when you're like not sure if you're good and just you're getting your feet wet. So it's really can be a tough thing to charge, and I totally understand that, because when I first started out, I was charging pennies for my work, like nothing. And it was all because I didn't really believe in myself and I had a lot of imposter syndrome. So I get that. But don't charge nothing for your work, because it communicates that your work isn't really worth anything. So always charge something. You could also do a trade. I wouldn't really recommend that either, but if they really can't afford it and you really want that portfolio piece, maybe you do a trade. So yeah, do not charge nothing for any of your work. It's super important. Okay, and then a couple other places you can get started is find a local content agency or marketing agency. Just type in the city that you're in, or the neighborhood, the city, the region, and reach out to them and offer to write some content for them. Content is a little bit of an easier in. Again, you kind of know my thoughts by now about how it's not as effective and not really where you want to end up, but it's okay if you get started there. And the reason I say local is because sometimes just having being in the same town is really helpful for them to trust you. They might have you come in. That's another place where I started. I had 2 content agencies that I started writing for in Asheville, North Carolina, when I was living there. And it was great because I could pop in, they could see I was a real person, and it wasn't an interview because they weren't hiring me as an employee, but it did add to that credibility, which can be, a little bit more difficult when you're first starting out, especially when you're building a portfolio. So that's a really good place to start as well. And there are an insane amount of content agencies and marketing agencies in the world today. So keep an eye out for them. And for opportunities, actually, I've had a few students find really good opportunities starting out on Craigslist, believe it or not. So those are some good places to get started. After you've gained a few pieces, you could also reach out to a copywriter and offer to take some work off their hands, or when they're overloaded with projects, to do some of the research and things like that. And you're going to get feedback from them, which is really valuable too. So that's another one. Another place that you can look is actually some local businesses who aren't really necessarily doing a ton of marketing themselves. Maybe they have a website but not a blog. Maybe they have a website but it's not well done and you think you can do it. I had a student who started reaching out to local businesses as, part of building her portfolio in this process and just starting out. And then she ended up making that her niche, was local businesses for the town she lives in. And that's her career now. It turned into her niche. And that was not what she intended at first, but she really loves it. So that can turn into something much bigger than you think. And again, doing local work allows you to really get to know, you know the town, right? So you can provide a lot of resources that are specific to that town that other people wouldn't, and they're going to maybe be more likely to hire you because you're actually in the town, and people love to keep things local. And then finally, another thing that I want to say is you can totally do job boards. The thing that I don't love about job boards is they don't generally pay well. It's kind of a race to the bottom like Upwork, but not nearly as much of one. And it's really time consuming to be on job boards. So just be careful with them. Don't take too much time, reaching out to people on job boards, but definitely don't write it off altogether. Maybe just set aside a certain amount of time each week that you actually reach out to job boards, fill out postings and apply for, jobs. So definitely keep that on your radar. What I hate to see is when newbies spend all their time on job boards, because it is extremely time consuming and a little bit less effective than the other things that I think I've mentioned so far. If you do use job boards, my 3 favorite are Pro Blogger, Blogging Pro, and Contenta. But so keep that in mind. But again, don't spend all your time there. And then I just really want to make sure to emphasize that you take the time to both reach out to new clients, because you're going to want that feedback. You're going to want that experience. It's going to help you build your confidence, but also continue to develop your skills. And you can do those at the same time. You don't need to sit at home and study copy and practice in a bubble for, months at a time before you're ready to go out into the world. That's really not the best way to do this. You're really going to learn the most through putting it in practice, through getting feedback. So really don't be afraid to dive in, even after you've written one thing. You will find somebody who wants to hire you. And yeah, I just want to say again that I didn't have nearly as many resources available to me that you do. Now there's an insane number of resources coming online for copywriting, including my YouTube channel, which I hope to continue to make more valuable and address more subjects that you guys need. So definitely keep filling out those comments and giving me ideas. But yeah, the information online is so abundant, and I try to remind myself that every problem I come up against, or something that I need a solution for, or something that I want to study, or a new piece of copy that I want to try out, I always remind myself that there is somebody who's been through my situation, my problem before me, and that the solutions are out there, because they really, truly are. We have so much information and so many resources available to us that were not available to us even 10 years ago. You can figure it out. You can make this a real career. And I just really want to emphasize that, because I've now seen hundreds and hundreds of people do it. So hang in there, keep practicing your skills. You're never done as a copywriter practicing your skills. So definitely keep that up and continue outreach. And eventually one day you'll have people recommending you. You'll have clients coming to you. You'll have people filling out your form on your website. And you will look back at all the work you did and be like, wow, that was so, so worth it. Because that's been my experience, and that's been a bunch of my students' experience. So it really, really is amazing, and there are a ton of opportunities. So keep that in mind and hang in there. And if you like this, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button, leave a comment so I know what you want to see in the future, if this helped, if you have any feedback. I love hearing it all. I love reading your ideas. And of course, hit that subscribe button. I'll be releasing videos weekly. Thanks, guys.